Now we're going to move over to the next presentation. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce one of my close friends, a former, business partners and colleagues, Lewis Perkins from the Cradle to Cradle Product Innovation Institute, to share with you how the Cradle to Cradle vision and the Cradle to Cradle Certified Products Program is really instrumental in making sure that we create materials, components, and products that can be perpetually cycled. So please give a warm hand for Lewis and be inspired. You can go down. Okay.
I'll just take this one.
Perfect.
Hey, good. Am I on? Okay. No, it's on, isn't it? Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to be here today. I want to talk for a few minutes about products and materials going into the circular economy, because that's the theory of change and the work that we work on at the Institute. And I want to share a little bit about sort of our perspective as well as where we're going next. So the topic today for this talk was really around the future of positive products. And one of the things that Cradle to Cradle really focuses on is living in a world of abundance. And what would it look like if products actually had a positive impact on the environment and on humanity in the process of them being made. And it goes back to our thinking around production and consumption models, and potentially our issues around production and consumption may really be a design flaw that we can now address. So our mission at the Institute is around, and it's here on the slide, turning the making of things into a positive force for people and planet. Just as a refresher, I imagine many of you have probably read the book Cradle to Cradle, Remaking the Way We Make Things. I'll give you a little sort of overview on the Cradle to Cradle point of view. And really, it's based on three principles, three assumptions. One is that we can eliminate the concept of waste, that if we live in a world where we emulate natural systems, that we actually can provide for an abundant future. And that when we launched into the first, second, and third industrial revolution, of which now we're in the fourth according to the World Economic Forum, that we actually did not envision a future where we would be running out of resources. And so the creativity and the innovation of the last 150 to 200 years has led us to a conundrum where we actually do have to design under the constraints of limitations. So if we were to look to nature, as Ellen MacArthur said this morning, look at theories like biomimicry, as well as natural systems where everything is a nutrient for the next cycle, then we eliminate the concept of waste. The second one is to look at the circularity of energy. And rather than create a linear model around the production of products that we make using fossil fuels and non-renewable resources, that we actually look to regenerative sources of energy, such as solar, such as geothermal, such as wind. And that this is another way in which circular economy arrives into the thinking of how products are made. And the third is really around celebration of abundance. And that says, let's look at the way in which we produce with a diversity. And within that diversity, we're able to entertain the ways that materials are looked at for their intended use. And that there's a creativity that we're on the wave of around how we look at raw materials and second and third generation materials as becoming the nutrients for our next generation of products, homes, buildings, apparel, schools, transportation, etc. So in the concept of eliminating the concept of waste, and Ellen put it up sort of eloquently this morning as well too, we think of sort of two cycles. One which is everything should be intended to either go safely into a biological metabolism, our earth, through our bodies, on our bodies, and into the earth, or it should be a material that could be upcycled into a future product. And that if we are simply downcycling materials and parking them in a product for 5, 10, 15 years, we're really only in a transitional solution, because ultimately that product will still end up in landfill. So that we want to advocate for the equal or higher value of materials going into their intended metabolism. And that's what creating the circular economy really is based on, is the idea of creating value around these materials, not just that they can go into second generation. So when we talk about the biological nutrient cycle, and this example is around cotton. If we're looking at the textile industry, then looking at ways that growing and cultivating that cotton may ultimately come back into mulch and compost, but we might also offer a solution whereby cotton becomes a technical nutrient cycle for a future generation of products. And in that case, all of the embedded energy, production, water, labor that goes into the growing of that resource, cotton, actually is able to be harnessed and used in a future cycle. An example of that would be turning the cellulose-based cotton fibers into a rayon-like material in second generation. So sometimes we advocate for biological systems to actually circle into new technical cycles. And then here is a technical nutrient cycle that would be looking at, in this case, a synthetic material that could be worn as long as it was a jacket or a pair of pants, but that synthetic material had properties that were valuable either in apparel or potentially in another material, so that if we take it back to the molecular level or the polymer level, we're talking about densified nylons and polyesters and polypropylenes, and where can they go next? And so the creativity of diversity that we talk about is also around, if this material was used in virgin quality for one use, what might it be appropriate for in its non-virgin second generation use? So as an example of some of the companies we work with, and we work with over 350 companies currently, here's some examples of materials as well as finished products that we work with. Ecovative was referenced this morning, Ecovative on the stage by Ellen. It's mushroom packaging. Bionic Yarn is an upcycled polyester. NGO is a bioplastic. And then Mayette has put out fair cashmere product that is cradle-to-cradle verified dyes associated with. I'm happy to share more about these kinds of companies that are doing this work, but we find that a lot of the innovation that's been out there around circularity has been engaged in with companies, and now becomes a time when we at the Institute want to foster collaboration and not use sustainability as a competitive advantage, but use sustainability as a way in which we all advance our suppliers, our partners, and our industry together, that we don't really have the luxury of competing on these attributes. So when we talk about cradle to cradle, we think about the difference of linear and circular models. We think about birth to next birth to next birth. And that concept of material reutilization is at the heart of what Cradle to Cradle is about. But there's actually 5 areas that we at the Institute look at, and when our assessors are working with and consulting companies around optimizing their products, they're not just thinking about material reutilization. We're also thinking very closely about the health and the wellness of those materials that are going into next generation. So that just as important as the identification of materials that we want to go forward into a circular economy is the material health and the identification of what intended use they go to. So you'll find that when you go through cradle-to-cradle methodology, the answer oftentimes to whether or not it's a good material for circularity is it depends. And the example that we commonly will use would be lead, for instance, as a material that we don't want in lipstick or cosmetics or paint on toys that our children are going to be chewing on. But lead as a solder within my phone or within my computer with an intended use for design, for disassembly, back-end logistics, that the company has taken a more extended producer responsibility with designing that intention and getting that lead back as a material that goes safely back into a next technical system is an appropriate use of lead. We have examples of that for many, many materials, and so our material health perspective really moves beyond just screening out bad known chemicals, carcinogens, mutagents, or reproductive toxicants. It's also about let's optimize this for the intended use and where it's going next. So my call to action to this audience and to others is, as we're building a circular economy, let us not forget that we want to embrace the concept of safe materials to be perpetually cycled. And there will be materials that can be recycled and upcycled that are not necessarily safe. And I'm happy to talk with you during a break more about that. So material health and material reuse is about the designer being able to choose what materials have highest impact to go into future cycles. But it's also important now, and my second call to action is, if we're going to be innovating and optimizing for the circular economy, let's ensure that the building blocks going into this new economy are also made with clean energy, clean water, and clean social practices around our labor forces and the way we impact humans in the communities in which they're produced. So the next three areas are around renewable energy, clean water, and social fairness. So at the Institute, one of the things that we advocate for is not only the selection of materials to be cycled safely forward, but also that the way in which these materials are produced is vital as well. So our role moving forward is to build a collective of more and more suppliers that can be verifying inputs going into the circular economy. And we've been calling out our relationships to a lot of suppliers over the last 2 years around let's innovate together to make materials that can be verified as safe with positive impact, utilizing these 5 attributes. Again, I'll just walk through them quickly before I talk a little bit about where we go next. And somebody's paying attention to time, I know, because I'm not. There we go. So safe materials means selecting materials that we know are safe for humans in the environment, and that the exposure of that material for its intended use. So it's different in different scenarios, depending on whether it may be safe for humans, but it's not safe for our oceans, and vice versa. Identifying where the product and materials go next is around thinking from an intelligent materials pooling standpoint of where we can eventually live in a system where through technology and data, we've actually pinpointed where materials are. And we know when we build that Boeing plane that every component has a second and third and fourth life, and we've identified who those future partners are to take the nylon face carpet fiber out of the plane, to take the metal, to take the polyester fill in the seating. All of this should be identified and tracked in the future. And that we do so around the concept of designing for regenerative use as well. So in that, designers are called to be such a strong part of this because it is around designing a product with the intended use of future lives. So in the current model, we're making products that cannot be disassembled, and if we are recycling or upcycling them, it's an afterthought. And so there's a tremendous amount of energy in sorting and disassembling and a lot of waste that's occurred in that process. This is an example of the Herman Miller chair that was designed with William McDonough partnership to build a chair that could actually be disassembled, where every component, while separate, could be going into a future cycle, and that by simply redesigning the chair with the disassembly in mind, we were able to actually recoup every 100% of that product could be regained and go into a future cycle. And it's also about selecting the right materials that would go into this chair that would have high value and none that would go to landfill. We're now taking this into our approach with the fashion industry, and I know you'll hear from Cecilia Braniston, I think, tomorrow around the work that H&M is doing, and we've been talking with them and now partnering with them on our Fashion Positive initiative to identify what materials are highest likely in the apparel industry for going into a circular economy, and are we creating the right mechanisms to verify that they're safe, to create consortiums to collect them in higher volumes and stimulate the economic systems that will bring these materials back. And so here we talk a lot about circulating products, and their components is really around optimizing the building blocks. So at the Institute, we're really focusing today on how we can catalog and build those in a materials library that verifies their ability to go into the circular economy. Again, designing with renewable energy in all forms. We start with offsetting, but eventually we look to a future where the production facilities are actually generating renewable energy for local grids. The vision would be that a production facility actually functions like a plant, and it gives back to its ecosystem or biosystem in the same way that a tree or a plant does, where every byproduct of it gives back. That would be true of producing renewable energy. That would be true of water, cleaner coming out of the production than it was going in, and it would be true of human rights and fair wage and labor, where lives are better as a result of the manufacturing facility making these products. With a few seconds left, I just want to wrap up with this. The principles then of circular economy as it applies to our group is to start to look at the systems and how they connect. So we've been working on our Fashion Positive initiative, drawing together the supply chain around the fashion industry. But when you look at a lot of the suppliers like Dow and DuPont and Invista, Teijin, Lenzing, they're also making materials for other auxiliary industries. So as we look at built environment, and our Built Positive initiative is around cataloging and tracking the materials going into those systems. Where is their crossover, and where can we create those relationships? The same with packaging, the same with health and beauty, and the packaging associated with that. Our goal is really to start bringing these groups and these industry sectors together to look creatively at how it maybe isn't closed-loop circular economy, but in fact it's open-loop circular economy. And that's what this speaks to: clean in and clean out, regenerative design. Collaboration and partnership then becomes the key to that, and so we invite everyone in the industry to start working together on how we create these solutions. And I think that's my last slide. I'll end with the materials library on our website. If you go to fashionpositive.org, you can start to see where we're building this for the fashion industry, and we'll continue to build it in other sectors as well.
Good. Thank you. No mic again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.